Welcome back to the Government Transformation Show. I'm joined this time by Ed Pikett, Director of Central Government at Hitachi Solutions, and Chris Cope, a Digital Programme Director at the Environment Agency. So this episode will be exploring if reusability is working and how we can do more to collaborate on common problems across government. We'll be looking at this issue through the lens of a case study from the Environment Agency, where Hitachi has helped them to deliver the Smart Environmental Regulation Programme. As ever, there's lots to dig into, so let's jump in. So welcome, Ed and Chris. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. So we're here today to discuss whether reusability is working and how we can do more to collaborate on common problem solving across government. So Ed, you're joining us from Hitachi, which has obviously helped numerous government agencies to crack their data and digital transformation challenges. And as I mentioned today, we look at this through the lens of reusability and common problem solving, which is where Chris, you're joining us from the Environment Agency to talk about how you've worked with Hitachi to deliver DEFRA's Smart Environmental Regulation Programme. But before we get into all that, really keen to kick things off with some introductions. So Ed, I'll come over to you first. As I mentioned, you're at Hitachi now, but you've also had a really interesting career in the civil service. So you've seen firsthand some of the digital transformation challenges. Can you talk a bit about what you're doing now and how you're working with the public sector to solve some of those?
Sure, and thanks for having us today, Sam. So I'm Ed. I head up our central government practice at Hitachi Solutions. We're an end-to-end transformation consultancy. And we have been working with and supporting Chris and his team and the Environment Agency now for a number of years, helping to execute Chris and his broader team's vision for a different way of undertaking regulation in a digital, data-driven way. And it's been an exciting project. It's been a brilliant project. It's been challenging at times, obviously, but we are beginning to see some really great successes and beginning to see the fruits of our labour really bear, really come to the surface now. So it's a pleasure to be a part of it. In terms of, I guess, our involvement, we're very much with a delivery partner for it. We take we're responsible for the technology aspects, but the project as a whole is a real collaboration between all parts of the Environment Agency. We work as a blended team with, I guess, people from different parts of the organisations working really well together towards that common goal that Chris has set over the last few years. So it's been, as I said, it's been an exciting project. A lot has got done. There's still a long way to go. In some ways, we've sort of barely scratched the surface of what can be achieved. But I'll hand over to Chris, who can obviously talk in a bit more detail.
Sure, thanks, Ed. And thanks, Sam, for the opportunity to share our story. So Chris Cope, I have a background in leading digital transformation programs. I've worked in energy, utilities, financial services, in both consulting and in industry roles. And about 5 years ago, I made the move to the Environment Agency, which was a bit of a change, but moving into public sector. But it feels like we're all trying to solve the same problems in terms of the modernisation, the digitalisation, and how do we build capability that's designed for AI. And I lead on digital in the regulatory part of the Environment Agency, and I'm program director for what we call the Regulatory Services Programme, which I think we're going to share a bit about in the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks both for those intros. And before we kind of delve into this really exciting project that you're here to talk about today, I did want to set a bit of kind of background, a bit of context to the challenges that we're looking at today. So obviously collaborations to share and reuse technology, data, services opens up considerable benefits in terms of efficiency, affordability, and just generally more kind of informed policy making in government. But there is this concern that shared services can't technically meet the specific needs of different users. Ed, I know you've spoken about this topic before, and Hitachi chaired a table on this topic at our summit earlier this year. Against that backdrop, kind of, is reusability working, and what are some of the barriers and complexities involved in that? Ed, I don't know if you want to kick things off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to sort of somewhat eat with humble pie here. I was a civil servant for 13 years, and I ended up at the Department for International Trade, where I was the Chief Digital Officer and Director of Digital Data and Technology. And we spent a lot of time building services and products, and we spent a lot of time researching and designing and iterating and testing and learning and improving and building and all the things that go with that. And it always felt like we weren't potentially, or at least reaching the potential of giving brilliant value to taxpayers, because we were building from scratch every single time. And it was definitely something that was always part of my thinking. And I think it's the thinking of everyone who is a leader in government or part of a program that's delivering service, to think, God, is there a way of doing this that actually can be more efficient and more effective? And aren't those guys doing something over there that's really similar? And how do we get hold of that? And it's really hard. Government is not always set up to share horizontally. It's structured in these sort of vertical pillars of departments and organizations. And we're starting to see data sharing, we're starting to see great use of APIs, we're starting to see standards. But this is definitely the first project that I've been involved in that has set out from the absolute outset the principles of trying to build in a componentized way, in a user-centered way, in a way that is entirely focused around data, that can really enable future reuse, and it can really enable greater value for the taxpayer. And all credit has to go to Chris and his team for pursuing that from the very start.
I think, Ed, being new to the public sector, it just makes sense that we should be working in that way. Don't know if you agree, Ed, but I'm seeing with the program and what we're delivering, there's kind of three kind of areas where reuse is really possible. Firstly, in terms of how you implement policy. So policies, particularly in the Environment Agency, we regulate in loads of different areas, but we go through a standard pattern of you apply for a permit, we do some determination, we bill, we undertake compliance and enforcement, and it's the same repeatable patterns, and it's the same. We've had conversations with loads of other regulators who are going through the same approach, and I think what we're starting to see is that yes, the policies are different, but the capability needs that underpin the policies are broadly similar in terms of application, determination, etc. So that's one area we're seeing. And I think the other area we're seeing is, as you've alluded to there, Ed, is around capability reuse. So whether that's in terms of code, data models, API connections, reuse in terms of the nuts and bolts. We're starting to see that there's so much opportunity across all the different platforms we're building and services, that there's a great opportunity there. And then we've just been doing with Hitachi a piece of work around digital twins. And I think what we're starting to see is how you can reuse the architecture for different purposes. So we've got an Azure data service, and we put that in place initially to think through, to bring our data into one place, do some clever reporting. And we've actually used that now for all our migration activities. And with the digital twin work, it's enabled us to bring all the data and to do all the modeling work at speed. And there's opportunities from the architectural perspective to move, to deliver much quicker and reuse the capabilities we've already got in place.
Yeah, I mean, kind of keen to get a bit more into this, but first just wanted to kind of rewind slightly just to provide a bit of context on kind of the project that we're going to be talking about today. So Chris, obviously the Environment Agency and Hitachi, as you said, are working together to transform how it regulates and protects the environment through, as you said, digital AI with its smart environmental regulation program. And this involves kind of replacing over 25 lines of business systems by developing digital capabilities that can be reused. But Chris, just to give us a sense of kind of what was the driving factor behind this project, and what are kind of the biggest benefits that you're seeing or hope to start seeing kind of towards the end goal, I guess, of this project?
So as a regulator, digital cuts across everything we do. So it's how we engage with communities and provide information around what's going on, from an environmental perspective. Digital helps us regulate and simplify the user experience. So if you need to apply for a permit and undertake some of the activities, so digital simplifies that. And then for our teams and for the EA, digital plays an important role in terms of how we use, how we simplify our business processes, how we can become quicker and more productive, but also more targeted in terms of our resources. So we understand the biggest risks. I always talk to my team about Spotify just quickly, and how Spotify is very, the whole product is designed around prediction, and understanding me and the music I listen to, and we're no different in terms of understanding the environment and how we can predict where environmental risk is and how we can then target our resources in the best way. So digital is key to how we deliver transformation. And some of the, where we're at the moment is making sure we move away from a fairly complex legacy estate to one that is much more simplified, is designed around what we call our service pattern, which is the value chain, the life cycle that you undertake in regulation. And with Hitachi, we are just putting in place those basics, those foundations at the moment, in terms of modernized services and platforms, well-designed customer journeys and business processes that enable us then to bring all that data together and do some of the really transformative AI piece.
And I mean, Ed, obviously you've been heavily involved in this project. Curious to hear how Hitachi has been able to support them in this mission and what you think has kind of been key to that success so far.
I think it's really interesting when you start on a project at the very beginning, at the inception, as a consultancy, we'd like to think that we bring a deep understanding of the technology and a deep understanding of methodology and processes and how you can transform. But you don't have a deep understanding of the problem. Inherently, that's the role of the client and Chris and his team. And I think we've now been involved for 3 years, I think, as a whole. Over that time, what it's helped us do is really, really align and get that deep understanding of the problem, deep understanding of ways of working, and kind of co-create a way of working that wasn't necessarily something that we had drawn up on a slide deck as this is our methodology from day one. It's something that's been co-created over the last 3 years, that way of working, that way of aligning towards that common goal. And I think that over those 3 years, being able to help us get that really, really deep understanding of the problem, a really clear conceptual understanding of what we're trying to achieve together as a shared team, that's probably what's helped make this such a really incredible project and such a successful project so far, and has set it on that path. So having that alignment, having that kind of the trust that you can have between two different organizations, not worrying too much about who necessarily is working for who, and just having common goal, this is what we need to achieve, we need to pin our ears back and get on with it, and focusing, having that sort of laser focus on the vision is a really important part of what we've been able to do.
Ed, could I just expand on that as well? Because I think we're dealing with quite complex issues that have been, built up over a number of years, and the only way to overcome those complex issues is teamwork. Having that, that we try and be the best intelligent client that we can be, coming to the table with his vision of how we want the organisation to work, and where Hitachi really helped us is bringing that, as you've said, that expertise of the technology, and but also the ability to translate that into delivery as well. We've made mistakes, I think, Ed, along the way, and we've learned and evolved and just worked in that, like you say, trust is at the heart of it. Otherwise, if you don't have that, then we've probably lost the battle before we've already started.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's funny really when I look at the projects. We work on multiple projects across government, and there is no one project is the same, although obviously conceptually in components and approach sometimes is. But it's quite unique in some ways for us, because we aren't delivering it in the same way as we are any of our other projects. We have created something new, a new methodology, a new way of working, a new way of co-creating and collaborating around these problems. So it's quite exciting for us. We're learning on that journey as well, and I think we've got to a good place that puts those foundations to build on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to know, I guess, what some of the bumps on the road have been and kind of how you've overcome them. And I think when considering the challenges of a project like this, as with any project, one of the biggest kind of problems I frequently hear is kind of getting buy-in. So Chris, kind of curious to hear how you achieved buy-in at all levels of the organisation to ensure that change, or if there's any other kind of bumps on the road, challenges that you've had to overcome. That'd be interesting to hear about too.
I think the critical point, Sam, is that we've listened and understood to our users, the needs of the organization, where, from a strategic perspective, where we're heading. And, we didn't jump into this with 2 feet. We listened and understood, and we shaped the program around those needs. Obviously that's a key part of how we should be doing this anyway, the GDS approach. But I think it's really important that listening and understanding. I think the other point, and I'd love to do a separate podcast on this, is around service design. And we brought service design methodology into how we've shaped the program. So we're making sure we build out the right services. The service design methodology is a great way of engaging the audience in terms of how, that future, how we want our customer journeys and business processes to work. And that's what's driving the program, rather than a lot of what I've seen in the past. You have a program, we have a portfolio of silo-based projects that are disparate and aren't joining up, and everything within the program joins up. And I think it's the service design that's driving the technology than the other way around. And it just seems to be working. I think as well, in terms of that engagement and that buy-in, what we've tried to do, particularly with Hitachi, and how we use the technology, is we've not come in with a glossy slide pack and said we're going to change everyone's world. What we've actually done is just slowly but surely build up confidence within the program that we can deliver, and we can demonstrate how the technology will make a difference to our teams and and to regulation. And I think what we're getting to a point now where we're confident in what we're delivering. We deliver some really good stuff, and that confidence is there. And through naturally that we've built up organically that engagement and buy-in, and across the organisation we have support with what we're trying to do and buy-in. I think it's that kind of. These things have to probably feel a bit more kind of start-up organic rather than top-down for them to work really well.
I think, because you make a really good point, delivery in government is hard. It's not necessarily always set up to enable delivery, some of the structures in place. And it was certainly something that I found. It's very easy to shut projects down or to find a reason not to do something. It can be expensive, it can be complicated, it can cause other problems. But the best way of trying to get something done is by showing the thing. Of delivering value is actually all the time, every single sprint, every single week, demonstrating the value that can be delivered by actually creating something new. And working in an agile way, iterating all the time, constantly improving, constantly being able to really show to people in the business how this can slowly improve upon their working life, how this can improve upon some of the challenges that they face every day, is a really important part of this. We talk about, and let's say this, showing the thing. It is so important to buy in. We that's very much what Chris does, and we support him where we can. But it means it's exciting. It means people love working on it. And from our side, it's one of the most popular projects that we run as a business. People want to work on projects that genuinely are making our country and our world a better place and a more sustainable place, and improving the quality of the environment around you. So I got a nice cue from my team saying, all right, when can I move on to the EA project, which always makes it easier from my side.
Can I just add to that, Ed? Because I think this all started 3 years ago, where we worked on a proof of value together, and we did a 6-week piece where we quickly demonstrated how and the technology could help us and some of the underlying designs, and we've just continued that way of working, that kind of it's not agile, but that speed of delivery, so that we can spin things up, we can break things is probably a bit of a strong term, but we can prove or disprove that we can make things happen with the technology. And I think that way of working is goes to the trust element, but it's from an engagement perspective, we can put things in front of people and say, this is how the future will look. And obviously these aren't productionized capabilities, but it's that kind of way of working that's helping. And also, I'd be amiss, Sam, not to mention that leadership plays a really important part of how you run this type of program. So, we have a really good SRO, Gillian, who gives us really strong direction and gives us space to be able to work in this way as well. We're reaping the benefits of that. But leadership and that steer has been critical to get us to where we are today.
And just on this point, I guess, about kind of thinking about different ways of working and collaboration, do you feel like that the lens that which government teams are looking at problem solving, is that starting to change away from the traditional silo structures? And more importantly, how do you think we can really enable that change in that kind of structure of the way that we're looking at problems from the get-go?
Was that for me or Chris?
Really just a question thrown out to both of you, to be honest.
Ed, can I answer that? Sorry, because I've just come from a call with Scottish Government this morning, actually, where we're all solving the same problems, and we're trying to work out how do we solve these problems together. And as I mentioned, I've spoken with loads of different regulators, and we're all trying to solve the same problems, and there's very much a demand out there to collaborate and do this together. I think how we make that happen is, and suppliers like Hitachi are key enablers to that. But I think from what we're starting to see is, with funding tight, we've got to be learning from each other as a general principle, if we're all trying to achieve the same outcomes. So I think it's happening. I don't think it's happening as fast as it. We're not overly mature in this space, but I think it's maturing.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And Sam, you might come onto this later, so I apologise if I'm jumping the gun. But we've been to a number of events over the last month talking about this conceptually, and there's a lot of interest, not necessarily directly just in this project, but the concept of how you go about sharing learning. And one of the biggest barriers to this, there is a belief that there is only one way to do something sometimes in government when you kind of build services, that you start at the beginning, you do a pre-discovery, you write a business case, you do a discovery, you go into alpha, you go into beta, you push it live, and you just follow that absolute route. And yes, absolutely, you need to follow those stage gates, and you need to make sure you're iterating and all the things that go with it. But there's also the opportunity to the start of a project to stand up and to look around government and to see who is doing what and how they're doing it and where they're doing it. And there's loads of fantastic other suppliers out there doing great stuff that we can learn from as well. I'm not going to stand there and say that it's actually the only guys doing this, but I think that there's lots of brilliant work going on in other departments. One of the sort of really interesting bits of feedback that we got we chaired around a couple of round tables on this, was that people don't know where to find out this information. And I know CDDO, which is the Central Digital Data Office, that kind of are one of the cross-government, part of the cabinet office that look across government and making sure that people are kind of being quite T-shaped in how they approach these things. They're looking at this, but there were lots of things. People saying, look, we need a register of services that can be reused. We need more components. We need greater ability to facilitate that. I think there's a definite barrier to this stuff, where actually sometimes the organization that might be developing something aren't the beneficiary from designing it in a way that can be reused, at least not in immediacy. There is a longer term benefit that comes from that, but it isn't always. And it's the same with, opening up data and building APIs that people to connect to, everything that goes with that. You kind of need to think bigger than just the confines of the project that you are individually working on. You need to think of government as a bigger entity, and it's a really, really hard thing to do, and certainly hard to get in a business case.
Can I expand on it as well? Because I think you run the risk of we've ended up with a legacy estate with over 100 systems and services, and if you take the approach you've just outlined, which I think is the general approach across government, you end up with that problem of complex estates because you've sold a specific policy or business need, but then you've not done that in an enterprise way. And I think if you end up with so many systems and online services, then it goes against the kind of core principles of user centricity, I think, and that's where I think we need to. That's where what I've seen is we need to be taking that organizational based approach to digital, because we need to design organization like government departments around digital rather than it just being a project by project based approach. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do a bit more.
Yeah, I know some really interesting kind of ideas of what needs to be done, sort of improve sharing, collaboration, common problem solving in government. I guess kind of given the challenges that government face right now, and Chris, thinking about the project you've worked on with Hitachi, obviously you've had the chance to present this to various government departments, also at the summit earlier this year. Keen to get a sense of kind of what appetite has been like for that, and what were the kind of top level conversations you had when you were presenting that, and what kind of questions people had around that.
I think mainly around, it makes perfect sense, but what are the challenges in this space to transformation? I think for us, I think it's the same across other government departments. Funding often drives behaviors and how we do that. And so get a lot of questions around how do you navigate that? How do you navigate some of the more cultural challenges? So it turns out teams like autonomy and to design their own bespoke solutions. So, we get there's a lot of questions around that. I think we're all trying to overcome those cultural things around how we deliver quicker. And then it's horrifically practical, this, but we are all struggling with the same issue of how do you move? It's great. It's easy to design a new platform, relatively easy. But how do you get there on that journey? How do you migrate all your data? How do you keep all your legacy systems going? And that's where I think a lot of, we talk about a few bumps. That's where the main complexity is, and where we've had to have a bit of space to work out how we do it. So one example is that we've got systems that are 30 years old, and it's quite difficult to shoehorn, not a technical term, data that's 30 years old into a modern system. So these are some of the complexities we're dealing with, and they're not insurmountable, but I think that's where we can start, across government, we can share some of the learning, and I'm sure others will take different perspectives, but they're the key things.
And Ed, does this echo kind of similar things that you found? If there's kind of anything you wanted to add there?
I think I completely agree. I think, and Chris said earlier that this project started out as a 6-week proof of concept, which actually is a great way to start, because you're not overreaching from the beginning. You're not turning around on day one and saying, right, here we go, we're going to completely transform everything. It's going to take 4 years. Watch us, go. Because inherently you're going to set yourself up for failure. If you go with that approach, you're always going to, optimism bias is going to come in. You're going to underestimate complexity. You're going to not understand the nuances of all the separate things that need to come together. Whereas doing it in a more iterative fashion, starting small, proving conceptually, can it happen, testing, learning, failing, jumping over those kind of trying to jump over the complexities as they come, is a much easier way of doing it. I think it will be challenging for some organizations that might look at Chris's project and go, perfect, we want to do that exact same thing. Let's write a business case for X amount of time and money and investment. And I think it's quite a scary prospect, looking at it as one entity as opposed to component parts and something that can be delivered over time as well.
And I guess I'd be remiss not to ask about kind of the benefits that can be realized from automation, AI. Chris, I know you mentioned digital twins at the beginning of this discussion, and curious to kind of pick up with that again and kind of hear what some of the opportunities are with that, and how we can better leverage the opportunities presented by this kind of exciting technology.
I have to be careful, because I've spent the podcast saying we don't want to promise the world. It really is going to change, like how we go about environmental regulation. It really is, and everything we're putting in place is to enable that, to make sure we have the right quality data, the right processes, and really, I mean, this is so wide ranging, but really this is, for me, about environmental risk and how we use the data and the intelligence that we have. Right now there are people up and down the country who are doing work, going out doing compliance visits, we're doing enforcement activities, we're determining permits, and it's about how we use that data to understand where the risks are environmentally, and how do we target our resources. And then I think the real transformation that I'm really excited about this work we're doing with digital twins, because the modeling aspect, so the ability to then bring in a catchment, an understanding of the dependencies within the environment, and if you put a factor in, or you do this or do that, what the impacts are. And we've obviously been doing that for some time in EA, but the ability and the technology and the data enables us to do this and embed it in our, much further in our ways of working. So it's really exciting, really interesting, and it's all with a really good purpose in mind in terms of how we protect and look after the environment.
And Ed, did you want to add anything in there at all?
I think we're going to have another podcast just on the digital twin, just to show some stuff, because it's really exciting and it's really interesting, and it's groundbreaking is always a bit strong, but it's definitely a different way of approaching a problem. So really exciting project there. I think we talk about it. I don't work for DEFRA, I don't work for EA, but we talk about regulating the environment as like such a small little thing. You say it so quickly, and it's so big and it's so complex, and it's fiendishly arms and legs sprawling out all over the place. Yeah. So there is huge, without sort of jumping on the bandwagon of AI, the potential is there for it to completely revolutionize all this stuff, but you've got to have those basics in place. You've got to have the structures in place. You can't just run off and start, launching some sort of generative AI model on something and hope for the best. It doesn't work like that. So it's really exciting. It's really interesting, and having that vision and having that purpose and having that as a bit of a kind of moonshot. It's a really exciting thing, and it helps motivate, it helps drive, it helps innovation, it helps, kind of keeps people on constantly guessing, oh, what could we do here? What could we do there? How can we bring that in? But never letting them, don't get too far ahead of themselves, but it is really, really exciting.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to what you were saying, Chris, about sort of service design and kind of keeping the user in mind when you're kind of creating these projects and how it's best going to serve the people using it. That's the kind of way it's going to be successful, I guess.
I was speaking with Elijah in my team, our data intelligence lead, about how user centricity and the approaches that we've learned in designing digital services, the actual approach with how we design AI and how we start to use all this intelligence and data, the model, the approach is exactly the same, and we need to think about it from a user centricity perspective. So totally agree, and it's something we're actively kind of talking about how what's the learning from other areas with how we start to develop out the capability.
Yeah. But just to wrap up, we want to ask you both, I guess, what your biggest lessons or takeaways are on how to create better reusability, collaboration, something you've taken away from this project that you've been working on.
So I had a boss or a mentor when I was in government, and he used to describe, and I say this, and I hope I'm not upsetting anyone who is a civil servant, because I have the utmost respect for anyone who works for government. But he used to talk about the iron lung of government coming in and closing around projects, stifling innovation and delivery, and you had to be wary of it. I'd say whenever a project is starting, allow yourself to think big, but think practically and pragmatically. Allow yourself to have the vision of doing something differently. Not having the blinkers on, looking up and around government and seeing what is going on and finding those pockets of really, really innovative, brilliant, purposeful delivery that's going on, and seeing how you can learn from them. And it's certainly something that we're trying to do, learn from other consultancies, learn from other organizations, learn from people and projects. It's a really core part of this. So I guess that's the one thing as a takeaway I would say that I've learned is keep learning, keep looking, keep searching for things that are good, and keep adopting new approaches for how you can do this, because it's really exciting stuff.
And Chris, has there been a specific kind of big learning moment for you through all of this at all?
I think how I've developed personally over the last few years, and what I've learned is, I agree with everything Ed's just said. But the key thing is when I started here was that there are so many reasons why not to do something, so many complexities, so many problems. There's so many strategies, and I think that it's what we've really embedded within the program and how we work is that learning by doing. And I think what we constantly see every day, is there's problems, but it turns out those problems are just items for our backlog that we need to do. And I think if you can get some technical teams and some product teams working really well in that way, so constantly evolving, really, really using agile, that's where the real magic happens, I think, Sam. So it's that kind of, let's not see the world as problems, let's see them as things that we need to do that's work we need to do, there's improvements we need to make. And I think we've really embedded that in our kind of team-based environment. It's so critical.
Yeah, no, really interesting and some great takeaways there. Really appreciate you both coming on the show, and yeah, thank you so much for your discussion.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Sam.